Let me ask you a question. When people talk about the grandfathers of sci-fi adventure, who comes to mind? Luke Skywalker? Captain Kirk? Maybe Buck Rogers? Fair picks. But long before most of them even existed, there was a blonde quarterback from Earth who fought alien tyrants on another planet. I'm talking about Flash Gordon. But first things first, let's get it out of the way. Flash Gordon is not the Flash. I know, obvious. Flash Gordon debuted in 1934. 1934. That's freaking before Batman before 5 years, before Superman by 6, and in this video I want to walk through the entire life of Flash Gordon, where he came from, how the character evolved, which versions worked, which ones got weird, and why this old school hero still makes his appearance in pop culture conversations nearly a century later. Because trust me, you wouldn't want to miss a thing. So, let's dig in. The birth of a space hero. If you want to read Flash Gordon, do not start at your local comic shop, because that's not where it all began. Flash began as a newspaper comic strip, mind you, not even a comic book. A daily strip printed next to crossword puzzles and stock prices. Created by illustrator Alex Raymond and writer Don Moore in 1934, it ran all the way to 2003. 70 freaking long years. That's longer than most careers, longer than many lives. Buck Rogers debuted in newspapers in 1929, and the character proved he could thrive far beyond the strip itself. That success pushed other syndicates to chase the same audience, and King Features made a direct move to compete. King Features even tried to secure the rights to Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars stories first, but that attempt fell through. So instead of adapting an existing space hero, they created a brand new strip that could go toe-to-toe with Buck Rogers. And Flash Gordon saw the light of day. What makes it even better is how simple it starts. Flash, a blonde Yale graduate and a polo player, starts as an athlete on Earth, brave, very all-American. Then comes Dr. Hans Zarkov, the brilliant scientist who predicts Earth's destruction because deadly meteors threaten Earth, and he wants to find out where they came from. Of course, no one believes him, so he builds a rocket with a desperate plan to stop the disaster. He doesn't ask politely for volunteers and instead forces Flash and his girlfriend Dale aboard. Yes, he kidnaps them. You see, early sci-fi ethics were, flexible. And off they go to stop planetary doom. The trip lands them on Mongo, a whole alien world ruled by a guy literally named Ming the Merciless. And yes, that name tells you everything, no subtlety at all. Ming becomes one of the earliest great space opera villains, the template for tyrants in shiny armor long before Darth Vader ever breathed loudly on screen. Here they discovered that those deadly meteors were sent on purpose by Ming. From there, Flash becomes the face of the rebellion, referred to as King of the Impossible. He fights tyrants, travels across strange kingdoms, and builds alliances. Many early Flash Gordon plots also explore Ming's obsession with Dale and Flash's repeated need to protect or rescue her as Ming attempts to claim her for himself. And I'm sitting here thinking, how did this not make it into my childhood rotation? I grew up on superheroes. I mean, I devoured Marvel, DC, all of it. I still do. But Flash Gordon? Barely a blip on my radar. From Sunday strip to pop culture legend. For years, Flash, Dale, and Dr. Zarkov run around the planet because every other week there's a new crisis, a new kingdom, a new tyrant to fight. They team up with Prince Thun here and there, which I love, by the way. Thun is always that reliable ally who hears planetary emergency and says, "Fine, I'll grab my armor." They head to Arborea, the forest kingdom under Prince Bairn. Then it's Phrygia, the ice kingdom ruled by Queen Freya. After that, Tropica, the jungle kingdom under Queen Desira. Then the Sharkmen, ruled by King Kala. And of course, you cannot forget the flying city of Hawkmen under Prince Vultan. I mean, how many kingdoms can one planet hold? Mongo said yes. But Raymond left Flash Gordon in 1944 to serve in World War II. That exit created a real now what moment for the strip, because Raymond's style was not something you could swap out with the next one. After Raymond left, Austin Briggs took over. His job was quite a handful if you ask me. He had to keep Flash Gordon recognizable, but also avoid a bad Raymond impersonation. That's a tough spot to be in. Later, Dan Barry took over and modernized the look during the Cold War era, adjusting sci-fi elements to fit the new public anxieties around space, technology, and global tension. And it's one of the many reasons that Flash Gordon worked. It never stayed frozen in the 1930s. On the other hand, Mongo refused to stay small. People who only know Flash Gordon through vague pop culture references sometimes assume it's one basic loop, with Flash fighting Ming. The end. Nah. Mongo evolved into a whole travel map of shifting kingdoms and uneasy alliances. Flash and his companions spend years of story time on Mongo, and their adventures move across major kingdoms and societies. Eventually, and this is big, Ming gets overthrown, and after all that tyranny, he finally falls, and Baron takes his place as the new leader. Flash and the crew head back to Earth because Earth cannot survive 5 minutes without trouble either. This time, it's the Red Sword invaders, so Flash packs up, heads home, and defends his original planet. You thought they were done there? Please. The Scorpio War breaks out, and Flash, Dale, and Zarkov head back into space. When they return to Mongo, to their surprise, Baron had married Ming's daughter, Aura. And under Baron's rule, Mongo finds peace. Well, mostly. Because Ming never fully gives up and keeps trying to retake control. Of course he does. That man just doesn't know when to give up. King Features distributed Flash Gordon internationally. By the 1930s, the strip ran in about 130 newspapers worldwide, with translation into 8 foreign languages. It reached an audience reported to be around 50 million readers. I mean, those numbers in a world without internet, it's mind-boggling. And just like that, Flash went global. In France, Flash's adventures appeared in the magazine Robinson under the name Guy Leclerc, and Dale Arden's name changed to Camille in that translation. In Australia, the strip title turned to Speed Gordon to avoid local slang baggage around the world Flash. In parts of Europe under fascist control, the strip faced restrictions. Nazi Germany barred newspapers from carrying it, and fascist Italy limited it to only a couple of papers. In Spain, the magazine Aventurero, which carried Flash, shut down in 1938 amid the Spanish Civil War, which also affected distribution. He even debuted on a radio show on April 27, 1935, roughly a year before the first Buster Crabbe film serial. The original movie serials, 1936 to 1940. Now, let's talk about the old Flash Gordon serials for a minute, because these things influenced science fiction way more than people usually give them credit for. Universal released them between 1936 and 1940, with Larry Buster Crabbe playing Flash for the first time in the 1936 serial titled Flash Gordon. The interesting part is that Flash was already famous before the movies even started. He had already made a name for himself from the newspaper comic strip, so audiences already knew who this guy was before he ever stepped in front of a camera. And man, the impact of those serials spread everywhere. You look at later science fiction and you can see its influence all over the place. EC Comics titles like Weird Science clearly borrow from the same kind of adventurous sci-fi imagination. The original Star Trek also drew from that same creative well. More on that later though. And of course, the 1980 Flash Gordon owes a lot to those earlier serial adventures. Even George Lucas openly admitted that these serials helped shape his thinking when he made Star Wars. In fact, he originally tried to buy the rights to Flash Gordon first. When that deal did not happen, he decided to create his own galaxy far away. I always find it amusing how a deal fell through, and now we have Star Wars. Hey, I'm not complaining. Now, if you sit down and watch these serials today, you will notice plenty of rough edges. The characters are often like stop types. The sets repeat again and again, and the special effects are questionable. Rocks resemble metal cans with sparklers attached, while ray guns sometimes look like hair dryers. So when people call them campy, they are not entirely wrong. And I get why. It is easy to laugh at Crabbe's very serious hero poses and Charles Middleton as Ming with style borrowed from the old Fu Manchu villain tradition, which might be problematic today. There is also lots of sexism, and that too in your face, which is... but cutting some slack to it now, because perfect entertainment never exists, and we have ample modern movies to prove that outrageous ideas can work if the energy is high. Look at Guardians of the Galaxy or The Incredibles. Both juggle humor, action, and crazy concepts, and I still love those. Flash Gordon lived on that same principle with big action, ridiculous ideas, and total commitment to whatever it was. Once you accept the tone, the serials become lots of fun. They offer a fascinating window into the early days of science fiction cinema. And oddly enough, the longer the story continues, the more entertaining it becomes. Crabbe first played Flash in the 1936 serial titled Flash Gordon. By modern standards, the production is simple, and the story can come across as childish. But at the time, it actually carried a solid budget. Hollywood had money back then, but what it lacked was the ability to produce convincing special effects. However, audiences did not mind and loved it. The serial became a hit for Universal and led to 2 more installments. Altogether, the 3 serials delivered 12 hours and 19 minutes of space adventure. And honestly, Crabbe deserves credit here. He may never sit beside legends like Paul Newman, Ingrid Bergman, or Kirk Douglas in acting history, but physically, phew, he looked exactly like an action hero. Tall, athletic, jaws so sharp they could cut the screen in half. His entire Hollywood image really rode on that physique. However, his acting was sometimes a little amateurish, I will admit that. But whenever the script demanded action, Crabbe delivered and then some. He wrestles 3 enemies at once, leaps off high ledges, scoops up a damsel, and runs uphill with her in his arms like, what even is gravity? He also has a facial expression that is a mix of shock and determination, which works well for a hero who otherwise looks impossible to defeat. The one unusual thing about him is his voice, which is a little high and nasal for such a large guy. I kept thinking how different things might look if he had a deep voice like, say, Charlton Heston. Still, Crabbe makes it work. In the serial, Ming returns to action. Of course he does. This time, he teams up with a Martian ruler named Azura, the Queen of Magic, and her alliance strengthens Ming's power while Earth pays the price. Flash, Dale, and Zarkov travel to Mars to deal with the threat. Once there, they learn that Azura cursed a group of natives known as the Clay People. These poor folks are now deformed and cannot survive in daylight. The Clay People reminded me of the mutants from Beneath the Planet of the Apes, as they look eerily similar. Flash and the gang rush across Mars while they battle Ming's forces and search for magical gems that can break Azura's curse. The sets here show more ambition, undoubtedly. The Martian skyline often appears as painted backdrops, but there are also striking locations. Azura's palace, the temple of the forest god Kalu, the tower where Ming fires a destructive beam toward Earth, and even a bridge made of light. They really went all out for this one. The costume department also finds its foothold here. Crabbe finally wears the outfit that becomes Flash's signature look. Black riding pants, boots, a shirt with a lightning bolt, and a collar decorated with metal rings and studs, along with a matching belt. I thank the Lord that the famous short shorts disappeared. It kinda gave me the ick. However, the costume department did badly when they gave Prince Baron a Roman-style chestplate, and honestly, it looks like a diaper. I'm sorry, but I can't pretend otherwise. Meanwhile, Dale spends most of the film in an evening gown and heels, which makes her look ready for a ballroom dance instead of a Martian war. And Azura shows up in ermine robes and a tiara like she is in The Crown. Then comes the final serial, Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. Ming has regained power on Mongo and threatens Earth with a purple ray that spreads a deadly plague. Scenes of panic in the streets use real newsreel footage of rallies and riots. Considering the film came out in 1940, it's hard not to notice the connection between that fictional plague and the rising tension that eventually led to World War II. Flash returns to Mongo with Dale and Zarkov and goes back to what he does best. He fights strange creatures, punches Ming's guards, swings from ropes, and rescues his friends every few minutes. I swear, Zarkov and Dale require rescue 24/7. The story also has rock men who speak backwards, sword fights, robot armies, explosions, and constant action. Mongo clearly never suffers from boredom. So the big question is, are Flash Gordon serials actually good? 100% yes if you accept them for what they are. The format reminds me a lot of old broadcasts of Doctor Who during the 80s, where PBS used to air those stories in short chunks across several nights. Modern audiences who enjoy the classic earnest hero will recognize something familiar too. Think about Chris Evans in the Marvel movies. That same sincere hero style appears in Crabbe's performance. Evans, although, may have stronger acting chops, but I will say this, and you might not agree with me, and it's okay, but Crabbe probably wins the physique contest. These serials also ran on television throughout the 50s and 60s, and for many viewers back then, this was the peak of fantastic adventure. Yes, the camp runs thick, and yes, the effects look funny now, but the spirit still works fine. At the end of the day, Flash Gordon serials are like a rocket ship built from scrap metal and wild, wild imagination. We boarded that ship many decades ago, and despite the sparks and rattles, it still flies. The 1980 cult classic film. Every time I sit down to talk about Mike Hodge's 1980 Flash Gordon, I run into the same problem. My brain wants to call it a guilty pleasure, but my heart feels that it's a little unfair. Yes, the film has its flaws, and I'll admit that in a heartbeat, but it also brings so much color, spectacle, and pure pulp insanity on the screen that I can't help but love it. If you didn't know the film came out in 1980, you might assume it belonged to the 1960s. That's not because the effects are bad. The movie actually had a huge budget, reportedly 3 times the budget of Star Wars. The filmmakers intentionally designed everything to look like a giant comic strip from the 1930s. It's a visual feast for me. Your eyes eat first, then your brain catches up, and somewhere along the way, your funny bone starts to laugh unapologetically. But here's the funny part. I love this movie, but if you ask me to defend it with logic, I might need a moment. While the project started with very big ambitions, as producer Dino De Laurentiis originally wanted Federico Fellini to direct. Yes, that Fellini. At some point, Nicholas Roeg was in the discussion. Eventually, Mike Hodges took the director's chair. The screenplay was done by Lorenzo Semple Jr., the same guy who also wrote the famous Batman series in the 1960s, starring Adam West. And that might up your hopes. The plan was very simple: take the playful style of Batman and move it into outer space. Except the movie doesn't quite work that way. Flash Gordon doesn't rely on heavy irony or obvious jokes the way Batman did. Is the film sincere? Is it camp? Is it quietly making fun of itself? I suspect even audiences ask that question in the theater. The story stays fairly faithful to the old comic strip created by Alex Raymond in 1934. We follow Flash Gordon, an American Earthling who is a polo player in the comics. Here he becomes a New York Jets quarterback instead. Sam J. Jones plays Flash, and our poor guy gets pulled into an intergalactic crisis when the scientist Dr. Hans Zarkov kidnaps him in a rocket. Meanwhile, the villain Ming the Merciless launches an attack on Earth. Dale Arden also gets caught in this chaos and joins the rocket trip. A lot of the plot is like someone grabbed the old comic strip and dropped it straight onto the screen. And once you remember that Lorenzo Semple Jr. wrote the script, things start to make more sense. The man built his career around playful adventure stories. The problem comes from the casting of Sam J. Jones. The actor had previously appeared as a Playgirl centerfold, and he certainly looks the part of a heroic athlete. Tall, muscular, the classic comic book hero look, but he certainly lacks the dry comedic timing that Adam West used in Batman. At one point, De Laurentiis reportedly considered Arnold Schwarzenegger for the role. Now imagine that for a moment. No, really, I want you to close your eyes and really imagine it. Arnold as Flash Gordon. That would be a completely different kind of camp movie. It would probably be as strange as Arnold's sci-fi titles like The Running Man or The Sixth Day. Oddly enough, Jones's slightly neutral performance may actually help the film. Because he stays so bland, you start noticing the supporting cast, and that's where things get really fun. Melody Anderson, who plays Dale Arden, handles the classic damsel role while also poking fun at it. You can see that she enjoys the performance. Topol as Dr. Zarkov also gives a good turn as well, though the script does not give him enough material. Then we have Max von Sydow as Ming the Merciless, and suddenly you see a gravitas on the screen. Von Sydow plays Ming with absolute seriousness, and that decision works perfectly, because this version of Ming seems genuinely menacing. Ornella Muti appears as Princess Aura, Ming's rebellious daughter, and the Italian actress brings glamour to the role. Timothy Dalton appears as Prince Baron and is so charming. Queen provides the soundtrack, and the moment the famous Flash theme begins, the movie becomes groovy. Flash! Ah! Now, if you try to watch Flash Gordon as serious science fiction, good luck. You might last 5 minutes before you let out your laughter. Right at the start, Flash and Dale land their plane directly outside Zarkov's laboratory at the exact moment he prepares to launch his rocket. How convenient. Ming's plan to destroy Earth is also pure classic pulp craziness. He fires strange advanced rays and magnetic shields and even moves the moon with his technology. How did that fix everything already? Another hilarious moment is when Princess Aura and Dale fight like enemies, before suddenly becoming friendly again minutes later. Buddy, maybe take one step to the left. There's also a very funny scene during Ming's wedding ceremony with Dale. The High Priest explains that Ming must take Dale as his Empress for 1 hour and must promise not to blast her into space. Because after all, he is Ming. Even that small request seems difficult for Ming to accept. The truth is, Flash Gordon does not work like Superman or Batman films that chase serious themes. There's no symbolic storytelling here. The closest thing to a message appears near the end when different groups unite to fight Ming's tyranny. Since the comic strip started in the 1930s, you might read a faint political comment about resistance against fascism. Even that's a stretch. And I'm sure after hearing all that criticism, you might think I don't like the movie. But that's not the case. Flash Gordon has a strange charm of its own. It begins with absurdity and ends with the same joyful nonsense. And thanks to a wonderfully eccentric cast, their bizarre little universe is absolutely worth caring about. The tone reminds me of movies that celebrate nostalgia for simpler storytelling. Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace tries something similar years later. The difference is that Flash Gordon never tries to modernize or improve the old comic strip formula. Instead, it wants to recreate it exactly. And that might sound easy, but any artist will tell you that it rarely is. Copying the style of an older work requires commitment, and despite every strange decision the movie makes, it stays true. And in my opinion, Flash Gordon might be one of the purest pulp comic adaptations ever made. the 1979 to 1982 animated series. Filmation's Flash Gordon from 1979 to 1982 still holds a very special place in my brain, and when I rank my childhood animated sci-fi, I place this series right beside Star Trek the Animated Series from 1973 to 1974, and Return to the Planet of the Apes from 1975. That's the list in my head, and no, nostalgia is not the most important reason here. I have time and again returned to the show and watched it again years later, and to my surprise, it still works. That's not something that always happens with old cartoons. But Flash Gordon holds up far better than I expected. The interesting thing about the show is the timing. Filmation produced the show between the late 70s and early 80s, which means the Star Wars phenomenon had already shaken the entertainment industry. Suddenly, everyone wanted their own space adventures. So sure, the timing was a little convenient. Studios saw the success of Star Wars and thought, people clearly want rockets and laser battles, so let's give them that. But instead of copying George Lucas, the animated series stays very close to the original material created by Alex Raymond in the 1930s. The tone, the characters, even the visual design, all have that old comic strips vibe and the classic serials, although the technology is retro-futuristic. This time, rockets have tail fins and metal surfaces shine like chrome. Everything is sleek and colorful and brought to life through animation. And indeed, the design work deserves the accolades. The series looks great when you remember the limits of television animation at the time. Filmation reused animation quite a bit, which you'll notice quickly. Rockets launch again and again using the same shots, and characters repeat certain movements. But you know what? I forgive it. The visual style has enough personality that the repeated shots become part of the charm. The first season on NBC actually tells one long story instead of weekly adventures. The plot unfolds across 16 connected episodes. The core team includes Flash Gordon himself, voiced by Robert Ridgely. Alongside him are Dr. Hans Zarkov, voiced by Alan Oppenheimer, and Dale Arden, voiced by Diane Pershing. These three Earthlings arrive on Mongo and immediately end up right in the middle of Mongo's planetary power struggle. An interesting detail is that Oppenheimer actually voices Ming as well, which means the same actor handles both the heroic scientist and the tyrant emperor, and that's impressive. Across the 16-episode arc, Flash and his allies clash with Ming's forces over and over. Ming throws everything he can at them: metal men, Imperial guards, lizard women, mermen. If Mongo has a strange species, Ming probably sends it into battle at some point. The story also travels through several regions of Mongo, including the icy wasteland of Phrygia, the strange land of Sik, and the underwater kingdom of Corelia. Flash doesn't fight alone either, as Thun the Lion Man joins the cause and brings that powerful warrior presence to the team. Then there's Princess Aura, voiced by Melanie Britt, and she kinda stands out because she has a slightly more mature look than you usually see in a Saturday morning cartoon. I mean, Filmation definitely knew what they were doing, but it's not something you see every day in kids' cartoons. But underneath all the colorful adventure, there's actually a clear political theme. At its heart, the story reflects the struggle against fascism in Europe. Flash Gordon becomes the outsider hero who helps unite the different kingdoms of Mongo. Each region stands for a different power, and together they rise against the tyrant Ming. Once you see that parallel, it's obvious. Ming represents a dictator figure similar to Hitler, while the United States of Mongo represents the alliance that eventually fought against that kind of rule. While the themes of Nazi and Hitler were initially very much part of the script, when Filmation decided to change the format from an animated movie to a Saturday morning show, which is primarily meant for the kids, the tone was ironed out and kept simple, keeping Ming at the center of all things. So when I revisit this cartoon now, I see more than a simple kids show. It mixes pulp adventure, striking design, and a surprisingly serious historical metaphor. And that's probably why I keep coming back to the series. You get flying cities, lion warriors, weird sea kingdoms, and laser battles. Yet beneath all that eye-pleasing spectacle is a story about unity against tyranny. And for a Saturday morning cartoon, that's pretty cool. However, in season 2, at some point, a network executive apparently decided the show needed a cute magical dragon, and they're gonna name it Gremlin. A small, adorable dragon with magic powers. Really? The first season built a strong pulp adventure with dictators, alien worlds, and strange kingdoms. Then suddenly we add a cartoon mascot. Are you serious? For me, that decision was kinda meh. The dragon pushes the tone into kiddie comedy, and that never really worked for me. I tried to watch a few episodes after that addition, but my patience ran out quickly. So when I think about this adaptation, I mostly focus on the earlier story, because that part works very well, and everything after the dragon arrives, well, I'm gonna pretend that chapter never happened. Later TV and new media attempts. By the time Flash Gordon reached the 2000s, Hollywood and television had already spent decades trying to figure out how to modernize him without sanding away the strange charm that made the character famous in the first place. The show, Flash Gordon, a modern space opera, or better known as Flash Gordon, premiered in the United States on the Sci-Fi Channel on August 10, 2007. The show came from writer and producer Peter Hume, a guy known for work on the original Charm series and later the sci-fi show Spiders. So, right away, you know this was a very serious attempt to revive the character. However, the series wrapped its single season on February 8, 2008, after 21 episodes. What makes that version interesting to me is how clearly it wanted some distance from the old pulp style. Instead of a campy, colorful space opera spectacle, the show aimed for something more grounded and contemporary. Eric Johnson played Stephen Flash Gordon. A lot of people know him today from
50 Shades of Freed or the Pretty Little Liars universe.
He's tall, confident, and believable as someone who could eventually become a planetary hero. Early episodes keep him on Earth more than expected, but once the show allows him to be in space, he finally looks like the Flash Gordon people expect. Dale Arden, played by Gina Holden, was reworked as a TV reporter, and Zarkov became part of a more modern sci-fi mystery framework. But it was Ming the Merciless that surprised me. John Ralston plays the character, and although Ming still rules Planet Mongo and still hoards power like a tyrant, he does not behave like the mustache-twirling comic villain people know from the old stories. He appears calm, polished, and respectable, clean-shaven, well-spoken, and charismatic. He is no longer addressed as Ming the Merciless, but now is referred to as Ming the Benevolent Father. When I heard that the first time, I paused. A dictator hiding behind a friendly public image? That idea feels surprisingly modern, don't you think? Of course, beneath that polite image, he remains every bit as manipulative and dangerous as the classic comic book version. You can see what they were going for. In 2007, genre TV had a habit of grounding older concepts, so they would be less corny and more in line with shows like Smallville or Battlestar Galactica. Flash Gordon clearly followed that trend. The show tried to turn a pulp space hero into a contemporary sci-fi lead with family trauma, dimensional mythology, and a cleaner television look. The problem is that this approach also pulled the series away from the big, reckless, colorful pulse many people associate with Flash in the first place. Reviews at the time reflected a mixed reaction, and critics pointed out that the show lacked the playful pulp spirit of earlier versions. Many felt the plot and visual effects came across as underwhelming, and thus the series lasted only one season. But I don't think the 2007 show failed because Flash Gordon cannot work for modern audiences. I think it struggled because Flash is one of those characters that punishes half measures. If you make him completely serious without the visual feast that it is, he looks like a generic sci-fi hero. If you make him too ironic, he stops feeling heroic at all. The 2007 show is fascinating for exactly that reason. It clearly tried something new, and I totally respect that attempt. At the same time, it's also a lesson in how tricky this character is to adapt for modern times. And that same challenge shows up again and again in Flash Gordon's reboot history. In 2014, 20th Century Fox began developing a new Flash Gordon movie with writers J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. In 2015, Matthew Vaughn was in talks to direct. In 2016, Mark Protasevich joined the project for a rewrite. And then in 2018, Julius Avery was reported as the director for a new version. So much movement for one project, and none of it produced a finished film. Then came what looked like one of the most promising turns in the character's recent history. In 2019, reports announced that Taika Waititi had been hired to develop a Flash Gordon film, originally planned as an animated feature for Fox Disney. But by 2021, producer John Davis said the project had moved from animation to live action. As of the most recent updates, the Waititi project has still not turned into a released film. Strangely enough, the comics have handled Flash Gordon better than film and television during the same period. Dynamite Entertainment revived the character under license from King Features Syndicate. One of the notable runs came in 2014 when Jeff Parker and Evan Shanner created a new take on Flash Gordon that received strong praise from comic readers. CBR later ranked it among its top comics of the year, and the revival cycle didn't stop there. In 2024, Mad Cave Studios launched the new Flash Gordon line, with Jeremy Adams writing and Will Conrad handling the artwork. How do we make this guy hit for a modern audience without losing the old electricity? And I kinda love that. Flash Gordon's legacy in pop culture and future. I think if Flash Gordon never existed, the space opera genre would look entirely different today. And I mean that sincerely. It had everything: a brave hero from Earth, a tyrant emperor who rules half the galaxy, and strange alien kingdoms that eventually unite against that tyrant. Meanwhile, a giant interplanetary conflict unfolds in the background, and right in the middle of it all, you get romance, tension, and characters who probably wonder why they didn't choose a safer career. Don't tell me it doesn't sound too familiar. It certainly does, because we see the same story everywhere now. Star Wars was clearly influenced, no doubt about that. Marvel's stories also take inspiration from the same kind of big interplanetary conflict. Even a lot of modern sci-fi video games that mix adventure with space travel borrowed from Flash Gordon. But the crazy part is, Flash Gordon did all this decades before humans even reached the moon. Back when space travel was still pure imagination, readers were already following a human hero across alien planets and galactic empires. When you stop and think about that, it's pretty damn impressive. And that is why Flash Gordon is always going to be a piece really close to my heart. So when I think about Flash Gordon's legacy, I don't see some dusty relic from old pulp magazines. So if I take a step back and look at the entire saga of Flash Gordon, there is one itch that I can't seem to scratch. If this guy existed as a real human being, he would have the most unbelievable life story anyone could tell. Seriously, imagine that conversation. You're sitting across from Flash Gordon at dinner and ask him about his life. He takes a calm sip of coffee and casually explains how he left Earth, traveled across alien worlds, dealt with tyrants who ruled entire planets, helped unite strange kingdoms, and saved Earth more than once. At that point, I would probably put my fork down and say, you're gonna have to start that story from the beginning again, because the scale of his adventures is ridiculous and not at all normal. And yet this hero, who helped shape the whole space adventure genre, faded from the center of pop culture. And the story may just not be finished yet, because I don't think Flash Gordon will ever disappear. Maybe Flash Gordon will rise again, because legends do not vanish. And if you ask me, that old rocket ship still has fuel in the tank. Whether it launches again tomorrow or 20 years from now, Flash Gordon isn't the kind of hero who refuses to disappear completely. So yeah, we wait. Because if history taught us anything about Flash Gordon, it's this: the guy always finds a way back into the fight. And if you love classic heroes like Flash Gordon and want more videos like this, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next adventure.